Thank you for watching Darker Things, the series that brings you deep dives into history's most disturbing events, personalities, true crime, conspiracy theories.
Free Rip, 1989. You were a college kid in Texas. Chances are you were piling into a beat up car with too many friends, barely enough cash, and a case of cheap beer rattling in the trunk. Your destination? The border. South Padre Island, Brownsville, Matamoros. A blur of neon music and drinks that never seemed to stop coming. It was supposed to be harmless, a rite of passage, a break from midterms, from lectures, from responsibility. And for Mark Kilroy, a 21-year-old University of Texas student, it was supposed to be just that. A week with friends, few bad hangovers, some Polaroids, maybe a sunburn, nothing more. But spring break has a way of blurring lines between safety and recklessness, between adventure and danger. And on the night of March 14th, Mark crossed that line for the last time. He was last seen outside a Matamoros bar just steps away for a moment. His friends turned around and he was gone. At first, it was the kind of disappearance you brush off. Maybe he met somebody, maybe he wandered off, maybe he was sneaking off to some alley. But when he didn't show by morning, panic set in. And here's the thing. You'd think when a college kid vanishes during spring break, police would move fast. But no. Instead it was, he probably wandered off drunk. Classic. Because obviously the solution to every missing person case is to wait it out and hope they come staggering back with a hangover and a good story. But Mark wasn't stumbling back. And within days, his disappearance was headline news in Texas. Parents stopped sleeping. Students cut their vacation short. The carefree buzz of Matamoros was suddenly edged with fear. And this wasn't just about one missing student anymore. The border had been simmering with tension for years. Drugs, cartels, whispers of ritualistic killings. Mark Kilroy's vanishing pulled all of that into the spotlight. Because when investigators finally started digging, they found something darker than anyone imagined. Something so grotesque, so surreal, that even hardened cops said it felt like walking onto a horror movie set. But before that, there were the nights of searching. The posters plastered across Mexico. Yag involved and parents begging for more answers. All of it leading to one of the most bizarre discoveries in Texas true crime history. And trust me, if you think the cops handled this one with precision and grace, I've got a bridge in El Paso to sell you. Half the time they were chasing dope, and the other half they were chasing each other in circles. But, spoiler alert, even a blind squirrel finds a nut once in a while. What started as one young man missing after a night of drinking would unravel into a story of cults, cartel, ritual sacrifice, and a descent into darkness that no one, not even Hollywood, could have scripted better. And it all began with Mark Kilroy stepping into the Matamoros night and never coming back. The search for Mark Kilroy wasn't just a few posters faked on lampposts. This was international. Parents fought in the FBI. Mexican police were pressured by U.S. officials, and suddenly a spring break disappearance turned into a full-on diplomatic headache. Brownsville cops were knocking on doors. Federales were sweeping through Matamoros bars, and every college kid in Texas was falling whole to assure their parents they were not dead. But the truth was uglier than a rumor. Behind the neon-lit tourist strip was a pipeline of drugs, money, and violence. Border town fried on both. And if you believed whispered, there was something else. Something ancient. Something darker woven into the drug trade. Now you'd think this is where the CSI Porter edition moment happens. Collect evidence, analyze DNA, and only pays cracked. But no. This was 1989. DNA was barely a Fort Root toy. Mexican cops were more used to rhymes than loud reports, and American didn't even play well with each other, let alone across the border. Then a break. Not in some high-tech lab, but in a dusty field. Customs agents, chasing down a routine drug mule, found themselves on a ranch, a place called Rancho Santa Elena. And what they discovered there made hardened investigators bone, gold, altered, ritual objects, evidence of sacrifices, carried out in connection to the drug trade. At first, it was unbelievable. Cold activity, human sacrifice. On the Mexican border, it sounded like tabloid fodder. They got deep. Both literally and figuratively, the horror came into focus. Among the remains, investigators believe was Mark Kilroy. It wasn't a far fight gone wrong. It was ritual murder. Well, you can practically hear the conspiracy theorists firing up their Xerox machines. Satanic cult on the border. Cultists get sacrificed in black magic ritual. And for once, they weren't completely wrong. The group tied to the rank called themselves Narco-Satanists. Drug traffickers should use cartel brutality with Afro-Caribbean ritual. Their leader, Adolfo Constanzo, wasn't just a dealer, he called himself a sorcerer. He promised protection from bullets, wealth, and power in exchange for offering. And sometimes those offerings weren't human. Mark Kilroy wasn't just another victim of crime. He became the face of one of the most bizarre and terrifying intersections of drug trafficking and ritual murder in modern history. Jesus Constanzo, born in Miami, raised partly in Mexico City by all appearances, he was just another kid in a Cuban immigrant family. But Constanzo didn't grow up ordinary. His mother introduced him early to folk ritual, a mix of Santa Elena, Palo Mayombe, and other Afro-Caribbean belief systems that had crossed the oceans with diaspora. By his teens, Constanzo wasn't just an altar boy, he was an altar builder. He blended Catholic iconography with magic, curses, and blood rituals. His charisma was undeniable. People said he had eyes that could hypnotize. He wasn't the hulking, tattooed enforcer stereotype. He was slim, well-dressed, articulate, more cult leader than cartel hitman. So imagine Jim Jones, but with a doozy. Yeah, that's basically Constanzo. Now, by the 1980s, Constanzo had built himself a reputation as a brutal, a sorcerer. But his clientele wasn't hippie seekers or desperate romantics. His customers were drug dealing, an elite, chaotic ecosystem of Mexico's border cartels. A man who claimed he could make you bulletproof was suddenly very valuable. Constanzo preached that sacrifices fed the spirits. The more blood spilled, the more powerful the magic. Animals first, then humans, always with ritual, always with intent. And the ranch at Santa Elena became his temple. Britons were killed, their bones harvested for use in ritual cauldrons called Vinganas. These weren't metaphors. When police finally opened iron pots, they found skulls, spines, animal parts, and blood congealed into a thick stew of terror. He convinced fallible people that his rituals worked. Low-level dealers swore by his protection spells. Corrupt cops looked the other way. Even cartel higher-ups paid for his quote-unquote services. Now, this mix of crime and cult made the Narco-Satanists uniquely terrifying. They weren't just killing the silent witnesses or self-scorers. They were killing because they believed it gave them supernatural strength. And that's why Mark Kilroy's murder resonated so strongly. It wasn't just cartel violence. It was ritualized. It was symbolic. He crossed the line between the brutality people expected from traffickers and something far darker. Something primeval. And here's the kicker. The guy wasn't even hiding mates. He strutted through Mexico City in designer of clothes, sunglasses, gold chain like some bizarre fusion of Miami Vice villain and cult priest. People followed him. They wanted to, because he promised them what every hustler, every gangster, every wannabe soldier of fortune craved: visibility. By April 1989, Mark Kilroy had been missing for 4 weeks. His family had gone public begging for answers. The U.S. press hammered the story, and under that pressure, Mexican police finally cracked open the Santa Elena ranch. What they found was nightmare fuel. Teen bodies in shallow graves, bones hacked, spines severed, skull missing their tops. All of it tied back to Constanzo's cult. But this wasn't just mass murder, it was mass ritual. He investigators walking to a crime scene that looked like a horror movie set. I somehow still thought, yep, Taco Tuesday in Matamoros. The cult wasn't small. Dozens of followers lived on or near the ranch. They obeyed Constanzo like he was both prophet and general. His partner, Sara Aldrete, a college student for high priestess, kept order among them. She was the mother of the cult, organizing rituals, soothing doubt, and keeping people loyal. When police raided, the cult splintered. Some followers confessed quickly, describing killings in chilling detail. Others swore Constanzo had real supernatural power and had been training him with reading death by curse. Constanzo himself slipped away. With Aldrete and a handful of close disciples, he fled to Mexico City. For weeks they hid in apartments, moving at night. But his arrogance never let him go fully underground. He pardoned, he spent money, he taunted the law. Because when you believe bullets can't hurt you, hiding isn't exactly your strong suit. On May 6, 1989, police tracked him to a luxury apartment in Mexico City. A standoff began. Constanzo didn't surrender, he opened fire. Witnesses say he emptied an Uzi out the window into the street below. The cops returned fire. In the middle of the capital. But Constanzo didn't die in a blaze of glory at police hands. Instead, court, and knowing capture and humiliation, he ordered one of his own followers to shoot him, along with Aldrete's boyfriend, Martin Kilroy. Constanzo was riddled with bullets inside the apartment. Self-styled sorcerer who claimed he was untouchable, killed by his own man at his command. But Aldrete was captured alive. She insisted she was just a bystander dragged into the madness. Prosecutors painted her out as the priestess who kept the cult together. To this day, she maintains her innocence, even as survivors and former cultists testify against her. It's the oldest cult excuse in the book. I was just there for the vibes.
People have said so many things about me. They've written my name in headlines like I was already guilty. But I need you to hear me, in my own voice, without the rumors, without the shadows. I had nothing to do with those killings. Nothing. I didn't plan them, I didn't want them, I didn't even understand how quickly the world around me was about to collapse. I was just a kid, really. I wanted the same things everyone else wanted: music, friends, the feeling of belonging. But somehow, I became a character in someone else's story, a story twisted by fear and judgment. I wasn't there swinging any weapon. I wasn't pulling strings. I was trying to live, to breathe, to be part of something bigger than myself. And yet, I became the villain in the eyes of people who didn't even know me. I can't change the past. I can't undo the pain of what happened to those children, and I grieve for them like anyone else. But I can stand here and tell you the truth. I did not kill them. I had nothing to do with their deaths. And all I want now is for someone, anyone, to see me for who I am, not for who they've decided I must be.
The cult's inn was as theatrical as its reign. Gunsmoke in the streets of Mexico City. a dead leader, a surviving priestess on trial, and dozens of followers left to wonder if their promised Matthew had died with him. When the smoke cleared from Mexico City shootout, the cult was done, but the shot place was just beginning. The story of Mark Kilroy's murder and the gruesome rituals tied to it spread like wildfire across the United States and Mexico. For Americans, it was a nightmare come to life. Free break, the week of sun, surf, and bad decisions, suddenly had a body count. Parents stopped letting their kids cross the border to Matamoros. The tourism economy tanked. College students canceled trips. And the fun and the sun image of South Barbary Island and the border party towns was replaced by headlines about human sacrifice and satanic cults. You know, it's bad when MTV has to interrupt spring break coverage to remind kids not to end up in a cauldron. For Mexico, the fallout was just as heavy. Santa Elena rant revealed how deeply corrupt and ran. Constanzo had bribed police, charmed drug traffickers, and built a network of protection and let him kill for years without consequence. His capture and bizarre death embarrassed law enforcement at every level. The Mexican government had to answer tough questions. How could dozens of disappearances, a literal killing field, and a cult tied to the drug trade exist right under their noses? The U.S. responded by tightening cooperation with Mexican authorities. Joint Task Force began making drug investigations with potential cult activity. Border security ramped up, and the FBI quietly started cataloging ritualistic crime, trying to separate what was real from what was fun. Because let's be honest, the late 80s and the early 90s loved a good satanic panic. Half the time it was Dungeons and Dragons and heavy metal. This time though, this one was the real deal. The legacy also lived on through individuals. Sara Kilroy, Mark's mother, became an activist, campaigning for drug prevention and safer spring break awareness. He turned her family's loss into a lifelong mission to protect others. And in pop culture, Constanzo's cults took on a mythic status. Books, documentaries, TV shows, even horror films borrowed elements of Kilroy's case. The cauldron, the rituals, the blending of drug trafficking with magic. Sara Aldrete, the so-called high priestess, became infamous. To this day, she insists that she was just caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. Although her life sentences in Mexico suggest the courts disagree. Interviews with her keep resurfacing, each one reigniting the debate about whether she was a mastermind, a victim, or both. It's the cult version of that old relationship excuse. It's complicated. The Kilroy murder also forced a broader conversation. How do we deal with individuals who combine delusion, charisma, and violence? Was Constanzo just a psychopath hiding behind religion? Or did his followers truly believe in the power of his rituals? If they did, does that belief make them less guilty or more dangerous? In the end, the cult killings in South Texas and Mexico weren't just about one American student lost on spring break. They became a symbol of how fragile normal life can be when fanaticism, crime, and fear collide. And maybe that's the haunting part. It wasn't random, it wasn't sudden. Constanzo gave warning after warning, creating his rituals in plain sight, with no one connected the dots until Mark Kilroy's disappearance forced the world to pay attention. So next time you hear someone dismissing talk about cults, or someone laughing off red flags as weird but harmless, remember this. The Santa Elena ranch wasn't harmless. 20+ people die before anyone looks twice. And a family in Texas buried their son because a madman wanted to feel invincible. Normal is fragile, It only takes one slug, one pulse, or one bullet to shatter it. As always, I'm Doug Duncan reminding you, once you enter the dark, you may never be the same.